to welcome. Did you make contact with aliens? Were you taken to another planet, to a mothership? How did they communicate with? Can you tell me what they look like? Can you tell me how many of them there were? Were you given food? Injections? It's important the entire world learns of your experience.
That's enough.
The teachers are alive. They're not books. They are the very living essences of nature itself.
Unbelievably powerful supercomputer that's running our reality, and we don't have a clue as to how to operate it.
Say in your mind, say to yourself, I am more than my physical body, because I am more than physical matter. I can perceive that which is greater than the physical world. For the seeker.
Discovery Houston, 20 seconds to LOS T-Dress.
Roger, nice to be in orbit.
Broadcasting from the Forest Tower Studios in the foggy creek bottoms of Arkansas. Cane Creek, Arkansas, that is. I'm Joe Roop, and this is Lighting the Void. You can check out our website at lightingthevoid.com, facebook.com/Lighting the Void, and at Lighting the Void on Twitter. Don't forget to sign up for the newsletter. Twitter. I hate that word. So make sure you sign up for the newsletter. It's in the top right. You get a free audio book. Not an audio book, excuse me. A free ebook about basics of astrology. So just get into that. Grab it. Drive off into the sunset with it. It is October the 4th, and the night is cool, and the moon is waxing almost full in the Aries. Fire up your chakras, sync both hemispheres of your brain together, and shoot your magical beam of light through your third eye into the void between spirituality and science. Because that's what we do, baby. Tonight, author of My Big Toe and NASA physicist, Thomas Campbell. Are you ready for this? This is the whole reason why we even started the show. We're at the crux, folks. And, this is going to be great. As a matter of fact, we're going to skip a lot of the intro stuff. We're going to get right into the conversation. But let me tell you, this is a live show. It is broadcasted on thefringe.fm and can be heard on lightingthevoid.com, TalkStream Live, TuneIn, Spreaker, iTunes Radio, Radio Guide FM, Radio Garden under Little Rock, Arkansas, all by proxy via the Fringe FM. The TalkStream Live number, if you don't even have internet, you can call the number and listen to the show. Just call 701-719-3971. Turn your speakerphone on. Go sit out and watch the stars. And you're not even using internet and you're listening to the show, man. So many avenues. Everything. YouTube, all that stuff. Lighting the Void. Go check it out. You can also check out all the show archives for free on any podcasting aggregator or app such as iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher. All of the anywhere you can get a podcast episode, we are there. Again, our thoughts and prayers are out to those that are dealing with the tragedy that happened in Las Vegas. Can't say enough about that. So just, keep those people in your thoughts and prayers. Some weird stuff going on with the footage, but that's not what tonight is about. Tonight, man. All right, so I'm just going to say this. The reason why we're skipping the headlines, the pre-show and all this stuff, the very reason why I, Joseph Daniel Roop, started this radio show is all about tonight. After I read Robert Monroe's books, I began this journey because I was already into the esoteric, and that's when science came into my life. There is no better man to represent science and spirituality and how they both meet than the man we have with us tonight. NASA physicist Tom Campbell is with us, one of the original explorers when Bob Monroe started the Monroe Institute. He is the author of My Big Toe, which stands for stands for Theory of Everything. Now, I also want to say this. When I started the show, I was like, I'm a nobody, whatever, and then this thing just kept growing and growing. And as I kept talking to the listeners, things happened. Now, this whole thing happened, not because of me, and I'm not sure I can ask Tom about this when we talk about it, but Ramon, a listener, introduced me to the one person that I would have wanted to talk to from the very beginning when I started this thing. How could I have missed this, right? But everything happens for a reason, and a listener that listens to the show, Ramon, I love you, brother, hooked this whole thing up. By the way, that's Rusty Pate. He's in the shack with us tonight.
How you doing, Mr. Campbell?
And so is Jeff Gilson.
Hey, y'all.
Now, I'm just telling you, the synchronicity of everything leading tonight, and, I know Ramon's going to say, well, you know what, man, I just sent out an email and tried to help you out, but it seems like all of this stuff, it just happens the way it's supposed to. This message is supposed to get out. All right? Now, I got to tell you guys, you can also listen on Facebook. I forgot to mention, if you go to Lighting Void Facebook page, there's a listen live link there, and you can listen to the show. So we're going to skip all the news headlines, all this stuff, because I feel like this is probably some of the most important information that we need to get out on Lighting the Void. So let me introduce Mr. Campbell before we bring him on, okay? Now, Tom Campbell began researching altered states of consciousness with Bob Monroe, who wrote Journeys Out of the Body, Far Journeys, and The Ultimate Journey, at Monroe Laboratories in the early 1970s, where he and a few others were instrumental in getting Monroe's laboratory for the study of consciousness up and running. Now, these early drug-free consciousness pioneers helped design experiments, develop the technology for creating specific altered states, and were the main subjects of study, guinea pigs, if you will, all at the same time. Now, Campbell has been experimenting with and exploring the subjective and objective mind ever since. For the past 30 years, Campbell has been focused on scientifically exploring the properties, boundaries, and abilities of consciousness. During that same time period, he has excelled as a working scientist, a professional physicist, dedicated to pushing back the frontiers of cutting-edge technology, large system simulation, technology development and integration, and complex system vulnerability and risk analysis. Presently, and for the past 20 years, he has been at the heart of developing U.S. missile defense systems. Tom is the TC physicist described in Bob Monroe's second book, Far Journeys, and has been a serious explorer of the frontiers of reality, mind, consciousness, and psychic phenomena since the early 70s. Now, My Big Toe is a model of existence and reality that is based directly on Campbell's scientific research and first-hand experience. It represents the results and conclusions of 30 years of careful scientific exploration of the boundaries and contents of reality from both the physical and metaphysical viewpoints. Now, the author has made every effort to approach his explorations without bias or preconceived notions. There is no belief systems, no dogma, creed, or unusual assumptions at the root of this book, My Big Toe. By demanding high-quality, repeatable, empirical, evidential data to separate what's real, exists independently and externally, from what's imaginary or illusory, Campbell has scientifically derived this general model of reality. Now, you can check out that website at mybigtoe.com. I have all the links on the website, and I could go on and on about this, man. It's really awesome to have you here with us, Mr. Campbell. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing just fine, Joe. Thanks for inviting me on. I think we're going to have some fun tonight.
I really do. I really do, too. By the way, you guys, if you want to join the chat room, just go to Spreaker. There's a chat room there. Ramon's here. Catalina's here. Jeff's here. So if you guys want to throw in any questions, you can put them in caps, and we'll ask the questions. Now, I really meant what I said, Mr. Campbell, that when I started this radio show, you were the man I was looking for. I actually contacted the Monroe Institute, and I said, is there anybody that I could talk to about this? And you know, I've contacted a few other people, and they were like, sure. They just started throwing out names, and it all kind of overwhelmed me, and I was trying to find guests and stuff. And I cannot believe, and a lot of your listeners and followers are going to probably laugh at me, but I can't believe how I stumble upon things, how that synchronicity works, because now that I'm listening to your research, watching your YouTube videos, checking out your books and stuff, it's like I'm reaching a new level of understanding. And do you ever are you still to this day like discovering new things about all this to this very day?
Oh, sure. That's the way it works. Learning never ends. Matter of fact, it goes just the opposite. The more you know, the easier it is to know more.
Right. And the big question for most of us here, and this is what we talked about last night, and I'll let you go into this, is everybody's fascinated with out-of-the-body experiences and travel. And you know, when you talk about consciousness from a scientific point of view, yeah, that's good and great, but the fascination of leaving the body and everything is what gets people. But we're interested in validating this scientifically, you know. But I've got to ask you, is there a difference between a dream, a lucid dream, astral travel, and out-of-the-body experiences? I know Bob didn't want to even call it astral travel because he was afraid of the connotations that went with it, you know. But is it all the same thing?
No, not exactly. It's similar. Let's say some of them we might say are brothers, and others are maybe first cousins. They're all similar in certain aspects, but they're all different in certain aspects as well. So it's not just, you know, one thing by different names, although the main differences between them probably have to do with the beliefs of the practitioners more than the than the spaces that you get into.
Right.
Well, we'll do more with that if you like.
Well, what I mean is, if I'm in a dream and I know I'm in a dream, like if I'm I become lucid, right? And I say, okay, right, I'm in a dream. Can I go back and find my body? Is that possible? Because you know, can I go back down to that level?
Yeah, you could. You could go find your body. If that's what you want, if that's what you wanted to look at, you could go look at your body from that lucid dream. If you were entirely lucid, that wouldn't be a problem. But most lucid dreamers wouldn't do that because that wouldn't be anything that would occur to them to do. They'd be off and they'd be kind of stuck in a dreamlike world because that's in their belief system. That's what they're doing. They're in a dream world, so that's what they're going to find. You're limited mostly by your own beliefs and your own expectations. In this reality, in the larger consciousness system, what you think, what you intend is mostly what you get. And here, in our physical reality, we have the same thing, but it's not as strong. Here, we can modify future probability with our intent. So you can raise or lower the probability of what happens just by using your mind. That's how mental healing works. That's how the placebo effect works. You know, that's the thing we can do here. But it takes a lot of focus at the being level in order to do that. But when you're in a reality frame that has a very loose rule set, like in the dream reality or when you're out of body, then that same thing works 100 times quicker. What you think and your expectations start to create what you see.
Wow. So then we all need to become more aware of our thoughts, basically.
Yes, you have to be very aware of those thoughts. You know, if you're out of body and you decide that you'd like to, have a cherry vanilla ice cream cone, well, you can just materialize one of them, and it will probably be the best cherry vanilla ice cream you ever licked. You can create things with your mind there. If you have fears, you will probably run into scary things that will be created by those fears. We tend to make our fears come true. And also, another point is that we get information. Okay, we get information, and then we have to interpret that information. So what we see isn't not necessarily the information we get. What we think we see is how we interpret the information we get, and we have to interpret it based on our history, based on our knowledge, based on our fear, based on our beliefs, based on our expectation, based on our experience. So all those things then are filters that limit what it is you actually see. Another point is that much of what you see, of course, the correspondence you have there is typically telepathic. That's the natural way that people communicate in the non-physical. And there's no language barrier at all. Telepathic works in terms of concepts, not language. And that then also puts a constraint on, the accuracy of what you get. Metaphors are not precise. You'll get metaphoric information for the most part when you're asking questions and delving into new things. So there's a lot of things that can change what it is you think you see while you're there. So the solution is, one, to be skeptical of everything, to be open-minded of everything, and the more experience you have, the better able you are to make those filters neutral so that they don't change, they don't modify what you're seeing. Bob Monroe was very good at that. He modified some of what he saw by his own filters and his own fears sometimes, but basically he was a very good reporter of not trying to add to it or add interpretations to it out of his own database. He pretty much just repeated and described what it was that he got. But he didn't really know that what he got was partly his own interpretation of the data, and that some of it was created by his own intentions. But he was one of the best. He was a really good explorer of the larger system.
Has it been possible for Mr. Campbell for folks to astral travel like that and met people, and then both of them remember it when they woke?
Oh, yes. Sure. That's not a problem.
I'm pretty new.
Yeah, that's not a problem at all. One time when I was working at the lab, now when I say the lab, I'm talking about a facility that Bob built at Whistlefield Farm. That was before there was a Monroe Institute. That was back in the early days when Bob was just initially studying it. He wanted to know, how did it work? He was just looking for some scientists to help him figure that out. And I happened to be at the right place at the right time, so I got the job. And I say got the job. It really wasn't a job. It was his money paid for all the facilities and equipment, and my time was volunteer.
Yeah.
But anyway, that was, and I did that. I probably spent close to 20 hours a week with Bob Monroe, every week. So it's like a half-time job. And I did that for probably 5 years. So you can imagine the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours that we spent together in that lab.
Yes,
and it wasn't just me. There were a few others that did this as well. A guy that I worked with, the two of us worked together all the time, was Dennis Menerick. I'm a physicist, and he was a double E, an electrical engineer. And to answer your question, one of the things Bob had us do was to meet above the lab, meet up above the lab after going out of body, and then go on an adventure together and interact and repeat back to him what it was we saw. Now, the way Bob had us work is he had a microphone on a cord hanging down from the ceiling. It was about 2 inches away from our lips. And we were in isolation booths that were electromagnetically isolated and acoustically isolated, so we couldn't hear each other. Even if we screamed, it would only be a little tiny muffled noise that we'd hear. And we were talking very quietly in these booths. I was in booth number 1, Dennis was in booth number 3, and there was an empty booth between us. So we were really doubly insulated from each other. And we met above the lab. We went off on an adventure, and about 2 hours later, we came back. And Bob Monroe gave us a big grin, and he said, "Do you guys really think that you were together?" And we kind of looked at each other and said, "Well, yeah, I thought so." And Dennis said he thought so, but, we weren't sure what had happened because we only knew our side of it. So Bob said, "Well, listen to this." And he had recorded everything that we had said, because everything that happened, we reported it back to Bob. What we saw, what we were talking about, the conversations with each other, we just ran all that by Bob. So he was aware of just what we were doing all the time. He had trained us to go out like that and still talk at the same time, to report it, because that way he could train us. He knew what we were doing. If we didn't do that, it's really hard to train somebody because you don't really know what they're experiencing.
Certainly.
So he taught us to do that, and that's what we did. So he turned on these two tapes. He had a tape that he had recorded of Dennis and a tape that he recorded of me, and he turned them both on at the same time and let them run together. And when they did, there Dennis and I were having conversations with each other, describing the same things. Oh, look at that thing over there. Oh, yeah, you mean the thing with the thing coming out of the left side? Yeah, that's it. The colors. And we were just talking about things. So that was the big deal for me. That experience was the time when I got it at a deeper level, at the emotional level. But up until that time, the things we had been doing, the evidence we had been collecting, it was 10,000 to 1 that we could have gotten that kind of information by chance. So intellectually, I knew what we were doing was real. But that experience took it from my intellect down to my gut, and I knew it at a different level after that. So that was the big aha moment for me. I kind of wandered through the next 2 weeks mumbling, my God, it's real. Oh my God, it's real.
Man,
that was a big impression.
Was that at the point that you?
Yes, you can go out of body, you can meet people, and everybody remembers it. And in this case, it was all recorded.
That is awesome, man.
Was that the point that you really realized that? Because I was listening to your video or watching your lecture to the Monroe Institute as you guys went down there and you checked him out for the first time and you raised your hand saying, hey, I want to be a part of this thing.
Yeah. Yes.
Was that the very point when you're like, man, this is real? It's number 3. No. He's telling the truth.
That was probably 2-3 years later. Maybe at least 2 years later before I had that experience when Dennis and I went out together. We'd been gone to the lab for a long time. We had been remote viewing and healing and doing all kinds of evidential things. Bob would have us in the booths and down and we'd be out of body and he'd write a number on the blackboard and, like a 6 or 7 digit number and ask us to read it. And we just did everything we could that was evidential to prove to ourselves that it was real. And I had all this information over a couple of years that said, yeah, it had to be real. I mean, the statistics said it was real. How else can you read a 6-digit number on a blackboard, that wasn't written there until after you went in the lab? So I knew it was real from the experience viewpoint, but that's all intellectual. You know it in your brain. You know it, with your intellect. That's different than knowing it in your gut, and getting it at an emotional gut level, which is what happened after that experience that I had with Dennis. That's the difference. I knew it for years that it was real intellectually, but boy, there's a big difference when you know it at a deeper level.
Yes, sir.
Well, to me, there's a big difference when a scientist who is wanting to check things out scientifically, and even Robert Monroe took a scientific approach. If you read his book or listens to his book, he would cut out variables that, hey, this could have been this, so I'm going to cut that out. He did everything scientifically. And to have you, who's a scientist in your field, and a pretty good one, by the way, in your field, to go into this thing, I don't understand why this is not talked about. Why is it not in the mainstream media? Why is it still called woo-woo? Why can't we get this going right now? Why can't we understand what's going on? We could change things, in this whole world if people would just understand this more.
Well, one of the reasons that it's never gone mainstream is that up until my books, there has been no fundamental scientific theory to explain how it works. So you can come up with experiences and say, I had these experiences, and all those experiences are subjective. And that just doesn't carry any weight in science. A subjective experience, could be anything. And because scientists tend to be materialists, they tend to discount anything that, goes deeper than the material world. This obviously is not part of the material world, so they discount it for that reason as well. So now with the My Big Toe books, I've got a scientific theory that explains just what it is, how it works, why it works that way, what you can and can't do with it, that sort of thing. So it may in the near future actually make it into science as we get further down the road and scientists are forced to give up their materialism because of the experiments they do. And I'm doing some of that too. I've got a bunch of 6 quantum mechanics experiments now out in a peer-reviewed physics paper published in Quantum Foundations Journal. And when these get done, what they're going to do is show that our reality is a virtual reality. That means it's information-based, and that consciousness is the computer. Well, that pulls, materialism right out of the foundation. And after that, we may see that scientists will have a little different attitude toward things that you're talking about, because there will be a scientific model that they can use to describe it.
Yeah, that's so cool, man. I am curious though, the double slit experiment that you talked about. When I saw you explaining that, we've talked about it a couple times on the show, but I've never quite seen anybody explain it the way you did. That it's almost like, and you can correct me when I'm wrong, because I know I'm going to mess this up. But when it wasn't observed, it was nothing but probability. It was nothing but just pure probability. And then when the data was observed, it was, I guess, correct, or it was where it needed to be.
Conclusive.
It was a particle then. You could measure it as a particle, but if you didn't measure it, it wasn't a particle. It's just probability. This reality is information-based, and it runs on probability. It's a probabilistic simulation. And we physical bodies here are the avatars, just like the elf in World of Warcraft's an avatar. That's what our physical bodies are. They're avatars in this simulation. The way it works, let me give you a little bit of an idea. I'm going to use the World of Warcraft as a model.
That's awesome.
Okay, when you play the World of Warcraft, you are the consciousness for, let's say, your character's an elf. You're the consciousness for this elf. That elf doesn't do anything if you don't make choices of what you want it to do. You tell it to fight or run or dance or just stand there. Whatever it is you tell it to do, it does that. It executes that. You're the choice maker. You're its consciousness. Okay, and this elf is being rendered, right, by a computer. Now, the way the game works is that you send information to the computer and say, I want my elf to fight. Okay, so then the computer draws on your screen your elf moving toward the fight, getting his weapons ready. And the computer tells you the consequences of doing that, because there's multiple players in there, plus the computer-generated characters as well. So then it sends consequences, and then you make another choice. Say, oh, now I want my elf to run. And then the computer, makes your elf on your screen look like it's running, and so on, and shows you the consequences of that. So it's really a dialogue between you and the computer. All the elf and the World of Warcraft world is ones and zeros on a hard drive in a server, in a computer. That's it. It isn't anything else. All the real action is you, the elf's consciousness, and the computer that's computing it. So now let's look at us. This is a virtual reality. Our bodies are like the elf. They're just avatars. Now, what's the consciousness? What's our consciousness? Well, note for the elf's viewpoint, if you were the elf and from his viewpoint, the consciousness is non-physical and the computer is non-physical. In other words, the computer that computes World of Warcraft can't be inside the World of Warcraft, world. It has to be outside. It has to be non-physical to the elf. To the elf, the World of Warcraft set is physical and everything else is non-physical. So the two active components, the consciousness and the computer, have to be outside of the elf's physical reality. Works the same with us. Our consciousness and the computer that's computing this reality we live in, has to be non-physical to our viewpoint. Okay, so the thing is, you never really get out of your body. You weren't in your body in the first place. Your consciousness, you're non-physical. All you have to do is get into your consciousness. It's just as easy as switching a data stream. See, when you're doing World of Warcraft, you get a data stream. That data stream comes from the server, and that server just sends you information. It lights up, say, 1 million pixels on your monitor. Each pixel has an intensity and a color and a position, and that's it. And all it does is send you 1 million spots of light. you look at a million spots of light and interpret that to be an elf and woods and streams and monsters and, houses and all that stuff. That's you interpreting that data, those million dots of light, into a world. You see, that's your interpretation.
Man.
So the same thing works here with us. Okay? There is a thing I call the larger consciousness system. And this larger consciousness system, part of it is the computer because it's an information system. Consciousness is just information. I mean, look at what you're conscious of, what you can hear, see, smell, taste, all of that's information. For instance, a light, photons come into your eye, they get focused on, by the lens into the retina. And what do they do at the retina? They create a little electrical impulse that runs down a nerve and ends up rearranging neurons. You see in the audio and visual section of your brain. All
Right.
of that's just information. It's all digital information, electrical signals, neurons, all bits and pieces of information.
Right.
So reality is information.
That's
This
so
reality
crazy.
is a virtual reality, and the virtual reality is just information. Okay, so what's really going on here is that you aren't your body, you are consciousness. But because you're a piece of this larger consciousness system, just like the computer's a piece of the larger conscious system, so are we. Each and every one of us is a consciousness that's a subset of this larger consciousness system. And we're playing a game. We're playing, entropy reduction trainer, Earth. And we're here to make choices, just like you are in the World of Warcraft. You're here to make choices. And by those choices, you will raise or lower the entropy of your consciousness. Now, what entropy is it's a physics word for a measure of disorder. So high entropy means a lot of disorder. So think of an information system as being a bunch of random bits. Well, if all the bits in the system are random, there's no information. Information comes from ordering those bits, from making those bits have some kind of structure or order. There's no information in randomness.
Making order out of chaos, basically.
Yeah, so you have chaos in all the random bits, but you make order. That creates information, even if it's just a pattern. See, if I just take my bits and go up, down, up, down, up, down, what's next? Well, it's going to be up, right? Because up follows down. So how did I know that? Because the pattern contains information. The information is really what's fundamental here. So that gives you kind of an overview of what's going on. So you really don't live in your body. You are consciousness. You are non-physical to this virtual reality. Your body is just an illusion. The Buddha told us that, 2,500 years ago, that this reality is an illusion. And he was right. It is. But we have a point for being here. There's a reason this virtual reality exists. There's a purpose that we have being here. And, all of it falls together in this theory of mine. It started out as a theory of consciousness. And the way I got to it, the way I discovered it, wasn't by thinking about it. It was by going into the larger conscious system, or you might say out of body, and doing experiments. I did experiments there. Isolate variables, try it again, get it to where you can repeat things precisely. And eventually, by doing physics in the non-physical, I was able to figure out pretty much how it worked and how the interface was here. So I wrote these books as a theory of consciousness, really, and I knew that the physical world was somehow derived from consciousness, but I wasn't real sure about the details of that. And then the book had been out a couple of years, and something, bumped into my mind, a fact, and the light bulb went on, and it was another aha moment, and I realized that the same principles that explained consciousness also explain physics, and that I knew, how quantum mechanics worked, in a sense that it was logical. You see, scientists look at quantum mechanics and they say, it's weird science, doesn't make sense. Why should the particles arrange themselves in a diffraction pattern when there's no forces on them? They just do that, and it's just weird science. Well, once you understand consciousness, you can understand how that works, and it is logical. So I'm just in the process now of rewriting quantum mechanics as a science, because I can make it logical and rational, and I can use that logic to get the answers instead of having to compute the answers. Now it's just a mathematical thing that nobody really understands how it works. And I did the same for relativity. Relativity is a very mysterious thing that has some very odd, non-intuitive and non-expected attributes to it, and they all come from the fact that speed of light is a constant. Nothing else that we know of is a constant like that, as far as speed goes.
Right.
That's why you see it in so many physics formulas and algebra and all that stuff.
Yeah, C is a constant.
Yeah.
You see, everything else, if I'm in a car going 10 mile an hour and I roll down the window and put a ball in my hand and throw the ball in the forward direction of the car, well, now the ball's going, and if I throw it 10 miles an hour, now the ball's going 20 miles an hour because it gets 10 miles an hour from the velocity of the car and another 10 miles an hour from my throw. So relative to the ground, the ball is going 20 miles an hour. Velocities add, not for light. For a light, you can have a light source going, 0.9 the speed of light, and it sends out a beam of light, and it's still just going the same speed, c, the speed of light. It doesn't go any faster because of the source. It's always constant. Right. Nothing else in our reality works that way. Right. So that's a big mystery. But once you understand virtual reality, you see every virtual reality has a speed limit. The speed limit has to do with the level of detail at which the virtual reality is rendered, its resolution. A delta X, is a little piece of space, right? It's the resolution. Let's call it what do we call it on our computer? It's a pixel. So we'll call it a pixel of distance. And also, your electronics are refreshed every so often, right? There's a refresh rate, a calculation rate in a simulation. Every so often you have to recalculate where everything is because things are moving around. Well, that's the delta T. And the delta X over delta T, if you go one position pixel for one pixel of time, that's as fast as you can get through a virtual reality. You can't get through it any quicker than that. You just move one pixel, one delta T. If you move 10 pixels in one delta T, now you're teleporting. You're jumping through space, disappearing one place and appearing someplace else. And our reality doesn't work like that. Our reality makes us move continuously through space. So every reality that's virtual, that isn't kind of a funhouse reality where you jump around from one place to another, has a speed limit. So that's why C is a constant. So anyway, I've started to rederive science, answered all the outstanding questions and paradoxes about in physics and science, and that gave me a lot of hope that the rest of it, the logical process upstream of this, is all correct. So that's kind of in a nutshell, what's going on here, and that this is a virtual reality. So when you go out of body, what you're doing is letting go of the data stream that's defining this virtual reality, these avatars, and connecting to a different data stream. And you do that by going into a state where you let go of all your physical data, your physical sensations. So you let all your sense data go, and you get in that empty place where you're just a point of consciousness floating in a black void. And from there, anything's possible. All you need is an intent to tell the system what you want to do. All you need is intent. You can heal from there. You can remote view. You can wander around in an out of body world. You can do pretty much what you like. You can get information. There's databases there that go with our virtual reality. You can get data and information on most anything, future and past. Now, the future data is just probabilistic. It's a probable future. The future's not a done deal. There's free will here. It's not deterministic. So it's only a probable future. But you can still get that data if you wish.
Wait, are you saying that I could go back and I'm sorry to cut you off there, but are you saying I could go back and view the Kennedy assassination and find out what happened?
Sure. You can go back and look at things like that, data in the database. It's all there. Okay. Now you'd have to be able to not interpret. If you've already heard a whole lot of theories, they would start creating expectations, and you'd have a hard time being open-minded and detached because of all the thing you've heard. But if you can get rid of all of that and you can just be open and detached, then you could see the way things played out. And you just see the information, and then you'd have to look at it from another viewpoint and see that information. And it would probably take you a few dozen times of experimenting on where to be and what to look for and what to look at before you would come to your own conclusions of what happened. But yes, that data is still there. It's historical data. You can visit that. Now, it's not, so I say it's a historical database,
right.
But it's got all that information is available.
I remember they just released that just a few years back. They had to wait like 55
or some the information or something. Yeah,
on the video that that was kept secret.
How do, because I want to be able to do all of this, man. Like I want to be able to do all of this, but I find every night I try this. Okay, I've tried techniques, and I will just black out into sleep sometimes. And I'm trying to figure it. Did you come to this easily? Like when you first started it, is it every person has a different sensitiveness to the consciousness levels, or is that your experience? Because some people can't do it at all. Some people just do it.
Or do you have to train?
Yeah.
I'm sure you got to train.
When I first got to it was pretty easy. I didn't have a lot of trouble with it. Part of that was the fact that I was very open-minded, but I also was very detached. I didn't know whether it was this relationship with Bob Monroe, whether it was going to turn out to be a good one and I was going to learn things and it'd be valuable, or whether it was just a crock and he was making it all up. I didn't know. I just met Bob, and I was hoping that it was going to turn into something really valuable, but I had no idea. So I had a very detached attitude toward it. I didn't have any expectations for it. I was just going to see what happened.
Just ride the wave.
Do what it said, see what happened, and that's the best way to do it.
Wow.
Now, another thing that gets people in trouble is if you have fears or expectations, they get in the way.
So,
your intellect will get in the way. You need to do this from the being level, not from the intellectual level. The intellectual level is what you think about. Once you start thinking about it, you start to go out of body, and then you start thinking, oh yeah, I'm doing it now, and then it's gone.
I've done that.
Because you shifted to your intellect. And as soon as the intellect gets in charge, it disappears. That's not where you have to work from. You have to work from what I call the being level. That's the core of you. Your emotions live at your being level. It's just the way you are, not the way you want to be or not the way you think you are, but just the way you are.
Right.
So getting the intellect out of it is a really big deal. Letting go of any fear you have is really an important thing too. And if you can do those two things, it gets pretty easy.
What about? I don't want to jump into theology real quick here, but when I was reading Robert's book, he met so many people who took their beliefs into these realms and actually viewed Robert as the devil himself at one time, come to get him and take him to hell. These beliefs, I think, if we were to evolve in an evolved society, these theological beliefs that we have might possibly be, in my opinion, the biggest hurdle to get over. Because to let go of an entire way of life and thinking is not easy for anybody. It's just not.
Beliefs are one of the big problems. The main problem that we have here is fear, but fear creates two other things, and one of them is ego and the other is beliefs. And all of that is bad stuff and gets in the way and prevents you from getting out of body, prevents you from evolving. It prevents you actually from having a nice life. It makes your life miserable and a constant struggle. So belief in any form is a bad idea. You should never believe anything. Always remain skeptical of everything and always be open-minded to everything. And you need to do both of those at the same time. So yes, beliefs are a problem. But people have beliefs about out of body because they believe that they are somehow leaving their body. Then they have a tendency to end up in their bedroom, kind of coming out of their body, because that's a belief of theirs. Once you let that belief go, you just basically teleport to wherever it is you want to go. You don't have that idea that you're going to ooze up out of your body, so it's irrelevant. That's not a thing. Now, if you want to do that, and that's your intention, well, you can do that. You can end up in your room and look at your body, but that's not really a very interesting thing to do. After you've done that, a few hundred times, that's kind of old hat. So you just skip that step, and you just teleport to, just grab hold of the data stream is what you're doing, of wherever else you want to be. It's not a matter of having to fly there or do anything else. You don't have to, you don't have to fly to get to the World of Warcraft site. All you do is log on. You just log on to a data stream, and there you are. And if you want to change that and you want to go to a different reality, well, then you log on to The Sims, and there you are. You don't have to fly from one to the other. You just log on. So basically, that's the way this works. And so that's a belief that we get out of our body. So that's why we tend to see our body as we get out, because that's what we believe. Therefore, that's what happens. That's what we do.
Whoa. So the techniques that they have about rolling out of your body, or the rope technique, or all these different techniques that you use, is really a thing that you're doing to trick yourself because of your belief
Exactly.
system.
They're all mind games. What they're trying to do is to focus your intent on not being connected to the physical reality data stream, which means not being connected to your physical senses. So you don't hear, see, smell, taste, anything, or hear.
Wow.
All of that's gone. They're trying to trick you. And by focusing on that rope and focusing on that rolling out of body, that gives your mind the okay that after you do that roll, it's gone. You're not connected anymore because you're not there anymore. So if you have that, it's just a mind trick to get you to let go of this reality. And I call those tools. You can create tools, metaphors, to help you do these things. But the metaphors are really all mental games, because the only active ingredient is intent. Once you get past that need for the tools, you can be out of body in a tenth of a second. It's trivial. You just go. You can be someplace else and go. Actually, you can be in a couple of realities at the same time. You can be in this reality. You can be someplace, some other reality frame other than this one. You can be collecting data on, Aunt Susie's health. You can be doing all kinds of things and do them all at the same time while you're having a conversation with someone. It's just, multiple processing at once. It's not a hard thing to do. You just have to practice it. It's sort of like looking at a TV that has picture-in-picture, and you got 3 sports events all in a picture-in-a-picture on one TV, and you just parallel process all of them so you can keep up with going on in all the games. It works sort of like that. So it's not very, it's not really very complicated, but we have lots of complicated tools for helping us do things. They help us focus our intent. For example, when you heal, healers will tell you they're light workers, and they will see a health body of somebody, and they'll have an intent that the part of that health body that's white is healthy, and the part that's not healthy is black. And the more unhealthy it is, the deeper the black. And they set that up as an intention. What they're doing is collecting data from a database about somebody's health, and they've told the database the output format they want it in. That's the body and the colors. So then they get their light, and they work with their light on that black stuff to get rid of it so that it's all white and it's all healthy. All of those are metaphors. None of that exists. Light doesn't exist. Energy doesn't exist. None of it. It's all information. And as soon as you get that, it's so simple and it's so easy that you wonder why you didn't think of it before. Well, because it simplifies everything.
I think that, and I'm gonna say one more theological thing, and I'll get away from that. The more I study this stuff scientifically, if you look at the metaphors of scriptures, it's almost like it's saying the same thing. In the beginning, There was the Word. The Word means logos. Logos means data and information. Let there be light, the kingdom of heaven is in you, inside you. It's like,
yeah,
it's all there,
right.
but we're interpreting it in a fanatical World of Warcraft type way, I guess,
yeah.
you know?
That is the way it is. Almost all of our communication is metaphorical. Words are metaphors. They're a symbol that stands for something. Everything is metaphorical like that. And yes, that was another one of my aha moments was, of course, being a scientist. My idea that religion was for the weak-minded and for the people who were frightened, and the religion was a bunch of hocus pocus, scary stuff that people use fear to manipulate people to take their money away from them.
Right.
And I had a very negative attitude toward religion.
Right.
But then the more that I got into consciousness and understood how consciousness worked, the more I realized that the very fundamental essence, the very fundamental properties, the things that are kind of the fundamental real stuff in a religion, a lot of it is true. That is the way it works. Mm-hmm. You see, the Buddha saying that that our world is an illusion. Yes, that is the way it works. Perfect metaphor for a virtual reality. You have God is love. Well, that's the way it works. It's about love. Love is the way you optimize a social system, and all of us being individuated units of consciousness make a social system, and that's the point of being here. So there's a lot of stuff in religion that is pretty accurate if you understand how to interpret the metaphors. And I was giving a talk once, and the venue was it was a Unity Church in Atlanta. And I happened to have both the minister and the assistant minister there, who both had, their doctorates in theology, like most ministers. Yeah. And I asked them, I said, well, you guys are theologians. Tell me, what are the fundamental attributes of God? And I said, I'm not interested in creeds and, dogma and that sort of thing. Just the fundamental attributes. And they thought about it for a while and came up with a list of about 5 or 6 things. And, the larger consciousness system had all of those attributes. So that's people have been able to get into the inner space forever. Anybody who had a mind was able to, if they took the time and the effort, they could get into inner space. So, 2,500 years ago, the Buddha got into inner space, explored it to a point where he understood what was going on. Yeah. And so have hundreds of thousands of other people studied inner space until they figured out what was going on. That's not new. What's new is that it's now been put into a scientific context and a logical context so we can understand it, as opposed to it just being poetry. Once it's poetry, then it's up for interpretation to anybody. Once it's science, it's logical and facts. It's a different thing.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you read it, you're thinking, okay, they went into consciousness, like you're talking about, had these magnificent experiences, came back to this realm during this culture, during this time, and had to explain it in words that everybody could understand and get with, because if they really told them what they really saw, they would have been strung up probably, and killed back then, but I think it's all there. And do you think that, well, I want to ask you real quick, because we got a break coming up, time, to talk to a physicist about time, to me is awesome. It's just another illusion, right? It's just another,
no,
it's not an illusion.
Wrong. No, time is one of the things that's fundamental.
Awesome.
It's not an illusion. Now, space is a complete illusion. The way you make space is to take a point, and on that point put 3 mutually orthogonal vectors. That defines space all over, out to infinity in all directions. That's 3D space.
Awesome.
So space is just a calculation, but time is fundamental. Without time, you don't have change. See, change needs time, before and after. That's a difference in time. Evolution needs time. Choice needs time. Before the choice, after the choice, the effect that the choice has. So if you get rid of time, then you get rid of change. You're deterministic. You get rid of choice. There's no free will. And basically, then you get rid of consciousness, because what consciousness is free will choice.
Right.
So time is a very fundamental thing. Now, time wasn't always regular time. It started off as kind of an irregular, you might call it primordial time, but eventually the system got smart enough that it realized that if it kept changing states like 10, 10, 10, it had a metronome, and that metronome then created regular time, and now it could sequence patterns and patterns of patterns. So the sequencing gave it a whole nother dimension in which it could lower entropy, in which it could grow. You see, information systems evolve by lowering their entropy, by getting rid of the randomness and making content, making structure, making symbols, things that are meaningful to it. That's information. So a information system grows by lowering its entropy. And
I'm thinking of a solar system being created as you're talking about that, into a solar system, into a planet, into life.
Right. Well, see, the way this virtual reality came about wasn't programmed. World of Warcraft was programmed. A programmer had to plant every tree, even if he planted a bunch of trees and then copied those and then pasted in another whole bunch. Every tree had to originally be programmed. In our virtual reality, it's not programmed. It just evolved. It took initial conditions. That would be a ball of plasma, very high temperature, very high pressure, and it had a rule set. The rule set would have computed three-dimensional space and kept track of all the energy interactions between pieces. And then you hit the run button, and it let that thing evolve. And as it evolved, the high temperature and pressure expanded, things cooled. You got suns, you got planets, you got solar systems, you got our planet, you got cells, they evolved, you got us. So all of that evolved. And then when you got us, that we represented free will choices that had evolved here, and consciousness then could log on and play us. So you had the avatars. They're just computed. When I say us, I'm talking about the body now. You had these avatars that were computed, just like the elf. You had the elf. Then consciousness could log on and play the elf. Well, consciousness then could log on and play us. And why would it do that? Because consciousness evolves by lowering entropy, and it does that by making choices. So making choices lowers the entropy. In a social system, making choices that move you toward love, toward away from fear, toward caring, toward cooperation, those are the things that lower entropy in social systems. So we down here working in this virtual reality, making choices to evolve the quality of our consciousness. We evolve toward cooperative, caring beings, then we are evolving. We evolve toward fearful, ego and belief type beings, then we de-evolve, our consciousness. We get a lower quality of consciousness. That's the purpose of our being here. So we're not in a programmed reality. We're in a evolved reality, and that supports all kinds of things. You've ever heard of the anthropic principle in physics? That's a principle that has found there's a bunch of constants that if you changed this constant, even in the 5th or 6th or 10th decimal place, the whole universe would fall apart. In other words, that the universe is stable depends on these constants being precise. And when they look at that, they say, well, that sure looks funny. It looks like this reality was created very precisely just for us to live in, to be stable. And, of course, that's what happened. You can imagine, Big Bang, take one. Oh, big digital bang, push the run button, take one. And it didn't last very long. It wasn't stable. Well, okay, here's what happened. Let's adjust those numbers. And you kept doing that through trial and error until you got these numbers out to 10 decimal places just so that the thing is stable. And then they let it run, and it eventually evolved avatars that had interesting enough choices that consciousness wanted to play them. So I've run over a whole lot of stuff very quickly here, so I hope your minds aren't about to explode. And if I skipped over bunches of stuff, but if all this really is logical, I'm just kind of making statements here. But if you want the logic that gets there, then you can get it from my books, or you can get it from my YouTubes. They're all free.
Well, we're actually going to take a break. You guys rest your minds. We're going to take a break. We are halfway through the show. We're with Tom Campbell, author of My Big Toe. I'm Joe Roop. This is Lighting the Void. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Pull back the blinds and uncover the truth. This is Lighting the Void Radio.
KTLK Digital Broadcasting. We rock the paranormal talk.
Hey guys, Joe Roop here, and I wanted to tell you about Gaia. Gaia empowers the evolution of consciousness. Now you can stream yoga, meditation, and mind-expanding programs that provide a true alternative to mainstream media, all to your PC or mobile device. Gaia also works on Apple TV, Roku, or Chromecast. Check out the My Yoga section where you can foster mindfulness in your practice with the latest expert-led yoga and meditation instruction at any level. Or visit the Spiritual Growth section and awaken your spirit with exclusive tools to help with mind development, spirituality, and self-improvement. My favorite section, obviously, is the truth-seeking section. Explore who we are and why we are here with specialists in metaphysics, ancient wisdom, the paranormal, and more. Also, the Health and Longevity series teaches how to nourish yourself with the insights and information from the forefront of alternative medicine, holistic healing, and longevity practices. Last but not least, hard-to-find films and series. Get inspired by hard-to-find independent films, moving shorts, nature and cultural documentaries, and feel-good films you can watch on any PC or mobile device. Get your first month for only 99 cents and support LTV Radio by going to lightingthevoid.com/Gaia. That's Gaia. Again, lightingthevoid.com/Gaia.
Greetings, I'm Space Boy. I started writing music at an early age, inspired by such synth stylings of the Pet Shop Boys, Erasure, Kraftwerk, Art of Noise, and 8-Bit. I have crafted my work into a hybrid of synth pop with modern electronica rock music of today, with pounding beats, high-energy arpeggios, soothing orchestral moods, and rock and roll. Space Boy will surely be a part of anyone's music collection. So head on over to spaceboymusic.com and get you some cool stuff.
You're listening to Lighting the Void Radio with Joseph Roop. Stay up to date right now, lightingthevoid.com.
Come own the night with us. Hi there, this is Dave Scott, host of Spaced Out Radio. Every Monday through Friday, right here on KTLK, The Fringe FM, I'm going to lead you down a path of mystery, intrigue, and suspense. So whether you've seen a UFO, had a run-in with Bigfoot or Dogman, or had ghosts running around your house, this is the place to be. Spaced Out Radio, right here on KTLK.
This is Lighting the Void Radio with your host, Joseph Roop. It's the show about truth-seeking and freeing the spirit, shattering your limited beliefs, revealing hidden truths, and much, much more.
Hey, Fringe FM listeners. Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or no Wi-Fi available, you can still listen to every minute of the Fringe FM by calling 701-719-3971. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. Saves your data plan and no extra cost if you have unlimited minutes. Call 701-719-3971. That's 701-719-3971. Listen to the Fringe FM on any phone, anytime, anywhere. KTLK Digital Broadcasting, thefringe.fm, Napa Valley, California, Little Rock, Arkansas.
right, thanks for hanging out with us. We're back. I'm Joe Roop. This is Lighting the Void, live on thefringe.fm, lightingthevoid.com. You can listen to the show there as well. We are speaking with author of My Big Toe and physicist Thomas Campbell. And, man, this is what this show is all about. And I can promise you it's going to be worth it to you to listen to this on the podcast, re-listen to the show, and you can also find his work all over YouTube, and I highly suggest you get his books. And if you're like me and you love audiobooks, they're also on Audible. So that is great, because that's how I listen to Robert Monroe's book. I fall asleep when I read, but if you put a book on Audible, I'm getting it. And I'm definitely excited that this book is on Audible as well. And I really appreciate you spending time with us. We're halfway through this thing. And, you know, hearing you talk about the science and the physics of this is amazing to me. But I have to say that, and I talked to you about on the phone about this just a couple days ago. We've always kind of known this stuff in our gut when we start questioning things, don't we? Like, deja vu, when we start really asking questions, we start thinking, man, it's like such a familiar thing, almost as if we've always known this truth. Does that ever happen? Do you understand what I'm saying?
A whole lot of people tell me that. Yes, a whole lot of people will read my book and tell me that they felt like they knew all of it. They just couldn't have put it into coherent thoughts or words, but it was in there somehow because it resonates. When you hear the truth, it resonates with you. And when you hear a lie, it doesn't.
Right. Yeah, it's always been there. The video, when I first heard you talking about the video game thing, I actually tried to explain that to a friend of mine a few years ago, and they looked at me like, man, you're crazy. You know, and I'm thinking, no, it feels real. I mean, I can't see behind my head. I can't turn my head around. I've played video games, you know, and I even was talking to Ramon about this. If you look at the dodecahedron model, you know, you can only reach out so far with your fingers and stuff and stretch out so far. It's almost like in fractality, you know, your senses work that way. And I was going to ask you about that. I don't know if you've looked into it or not, but I think Pythagoras was onto something with these geometrical shapes and stuff back then. Like, I don't understand fractals that much, but I think there's something to it when you look at the math, you know, the ratios, the golden ratio and phi and all that.
Well, this is a computed reality. It's math based. You would expect those kinds of things. If you're going to compute a reality, you're going to use mathematics in the computations. So the reality you compute, it's going to turn out to be pretty mathematical. That's right. Why, you know, people have always said that nature speaks math, you know, that physics is basically a mathematical way of describing reality. And why should reality be such that you can describe it mathematically better than any other way? Well, it's because that's how it's created. It's a computed reality. So that's why. And it's also a fractal reality. Fractals, you know, are called geometric fractals anyway, are things that most of us know about. And they're little geometric shapes like a triangle. And then you put more triangles on each side of the triangle, and you keep building it up at different scales and levels until you get this amazing, beautiful thing that looks like, you know, flowers and all sorts of stuff that gets very, very complex and very, very deep in the detail and structure. And a fractal just keeps going on. Well, this reality is not a geometric fractal. It's a process fractal. The process is evolution, and it's a fractal process because the output then goes around and feeds the input. You put in an input, that changes the output, then that changed output goes back into the input and gets you another changed output. So it feeds itself, if you will, and that creates this process fractal. That's why we can build up such complex, magnificent, detailed things through evolution. You know, you start with a cell, and the cellular biologists and the people that study evolution can derive everything else. Give them a cell, you know, and they'll start up with one-celled things to multi-celled things to things that were, you know, had organs, and right on up the line until you get to us and all the plants and everything else can tell you exactly how it all could evolve just from that one cell. So you start someplace and you end up with evolution as a process fractal. So we look at our body, and there's trillions of cells that are all cooperating in a very specific way. And if they didn't, well, we'd die. If they don't cooperate, then the body doesn't work. So have these trillions of things all cooperating in extremely complex arrays. And that's because it's a fractal. It's a process fractal. That's what evolution is. So our existence here is fractal. So it's no wonder that we take this down to a 3D level of geometry, and it starts to look like geometric fractals. That's why the people who do animation can use fractals to make rivers and lakes and sky and rocks and trees and all kinds of things, to make the animation very realistic, but now also very fast because it's computed. It used to be that artists had to draw all that stuff when they animated. Now they don't. They compute it with fractals. So that's why fractals represent this physical world. It's because we live in a fractal world. So when you look at 3D geometry, then you end up down with fractals that produce all of that. So it makes sense. This reality uses math to compute it. Therefore, it's math that describes it.
Wow. Yeah, I'm really interested in that stuff. I keep looking into it and seeing these shapes and stuff. And even I was talking to Ramon about this. Oh man, my cat just jumped up on me. Even in Revelations, he was talking about the kingdom of heaven, talking about how it had this certain shape to it and the length and width and height, and there's a volume thing, and I put it all together and it spit out a dodecahedron. And I was like, wait a minute, it's like somebody implanted this information into us just to keep it there for us. Like they've known this all along. And I'm just curious, I know it sounds a little crazy, but at this point, what is crazy, right? Because when I say, did aliens put this here? Well, what's an alien? I mean, we're aliens. From this talk, everything is possible right now,
Well, that's true. If you get once you get to the idea that this is a virtual reality and it's a digital computation, digital computations are extremely flexible. They can do almost anything. You can pause them, you can fast forward them, you can back them up and start them over at some other point. They are very, very flexible. So almost anything is possible.
Right.
Everything isn't necessarily likely, but just about everything is possible.
Now, did you ever run into, as you were traveling and exploring, did you ever run into any of these same entities that Robert did? Were like, hey, don't come around me. I don't want you to get infected with your beliefs or whatever, or your, what did he call it? He called it some kind of static noise that our thoughts are putting off all the time. Did you ever run into entities like that?
No, I didn't. I did run into similar things sometimes, but you see, everybody interprets the information they get in their own way.
Okay.
So you have to look at what Bob wrote as his own metaphors to describe what he got, what he saw. So he gets data and I get data, and if the data is identical, we will both interpret it in terms of our own experience base. So it'll come out looking a little different. Now, if two people have the exact same experience base, let's say they're twins and they always lived in the same house, so their experience always saw the same people and always dated the same girl, everything was exactly the same, then they would tend to interpret things the same way because they'd have the same sort of experience base. But most of us are pretty different. We come from different walks of life and different kinds of family and live in different cultures. So we tend to interpret things differently, particularly if those things are things that are pretty far out, things that we can't easily come up with a pattern match from our experience. See, our experience is all physical, and what we tend to do is pattern match it. So we come up with something that's the similar thing that we can think of in our own experience base, and that's what we call it. So when we run into something that talks, then we immediately create a body that looks something like ours, because that's our pattern for things that talk. People talk, rocks don't talk, chickens don't talk. So when we hear text, when we hear speech, we hear somebody talking, we don't then interpret that as a chicken or a rock, because that's not the way we interpret things. we interpret that as a person. And then we make that person look like us. You know, it's kind of got a head and arms, legs, body. Maybe if we don't want to do details, we put a robe on it so we don't have to worry about the details.
Or a black hood, in my case.
Yeah, right. Put a hood on it, and then we don't have to worry about the details. But we create a humanoid because that, in our experience, is what talks. So you see, a lot of that is just our interpretation of the data. And then once you understand that, you can start separating the data from your interpretation of the data, and that way you make your filter, your interpretation, more and more neutral, so that it doesn't change the content of the data. It just gives you pretty much what was there. But that just takes a lot of experience to do that.
Tom, how do we? I'm thinking about the times I've left my body. The times that, left my body, actually, the time I thought I was out of my body, walked out of my yard, because I used to do these stupid things where I would try to fly in my front yard. My neighbors would be looking at me like, what is he doing? But, I mean, I was doing that because sometimes I didn't know when I was in a dream, and I'd caught myself one day doing it, and I flew and grabbed a hold of my tree, and I was like, hey, I'm here, I'm doing this thing now, right? And I was like, as soon as I started thinking that, things started getting messed up. I said, okay, I'm going to go to the moon. I want to see the dark side of the moon. Went to fly straight up above, and as I got to the stars, then it just turned into mush. Nothing happened. I didn't go anywhere. It was like a TV that kept turning channels, And so what you're saying is, when I become an expector instead of an observer, I can almost mess up my own walk a little bit.
Absolutely. You have to be able to think from the being level, not from the intellectual level. Now, I know that's confusing, but you have to think without the ego, without the fear, without the beliefs. You have to get rid of all that. You have to stop judging, analyzing, explaining. You just have to experience. Just let the experience happen. As you were heading up into the stars, you probably had this thought just came across the back of your mind. This is scary. I'm getting pretty high up, or you had something cross your mind that was, am I making this up, or is this real? See, any of those thoughts now are intellectual thoughts, and they'll crash you, because that's not what's going on. It's not an intellectual process. It's a process at the being level, not the intellectual level. You can't think your way into this. You have to. All those tricks, the climbing the rope and the rolling out and all the rest of that, are ways to get you to stop thinking and stop judging and let go of your sense data.
That's so cool. And that's, as you explain it, I'm actually thinking about how hard, sorry, because my cat keeps jumping up on me, how hard that's going to be for me. I'm going to have to retrain my mind into just letting things come. Just let things come.
The key is two things. One, let it come. Don't try to use your intellect, because that will stop it. And two, engage everything. So as you just let it come and you see something stupid, you see, a big pink rabbit, standing, leaning up against the giant daisy. And you think, oh, that's something out of some kid vid, that I saw. And you push that away like that's my imagination. Don't do that. Whatever you see, go into it, engage it, dive into that, become one with it, that sort of thing. Connect to it, engage it.
As soon as you do that, that thing will lead to another thing, which will lead to another thing, and pretty soon you're gone. You're out there, doing whatever. And it was that stupid pink rabbit and daisy that actually was your portal to go. And you just sat there and looked at it and then said that was dumb, and you pushed it away, so you lost the opportunity. Engage everything. Be open-minded. Be skeptical of everything. But everything, when you're open-minded, then everything could have a purpose and could mean something. So you're open-minded to all of it. You don't judge it and say, oh, that's a silly thing. I'm not going to deal with that. That's just right out of my imagination. Don't do that. Just engage it. Go into it. Dive through it. Everything you see is something that you can connect to, and that will lead you elsewhere, and you'll find then you can get out of your body really easily just by engaging.
And don't start getting your intellect to ask, is this real or am I making it up? That will bring you right out of it. Just experience it. Just go with the experience. Now, eventually, you will have to decide, is it useful or not? If what you've been doing is just not useful and you're not learning anything, it's not going anywhere, then let it go. And it doesn't matter where it comes from. If it's not useful, let it go. If it is useful, it also doesn't matter where it's coming from. Use it and learn from it. Go with it. See, this idea about is it real is very prejudiced because we really don't know what real is when we say that. We think real is physical, attached to the physical world. That's not real. The physical world is just a calculation. It's a virtual reality. The only thing that's real is consciousness. So when we say, is that real? That question really doesn't mean anything in the context that we're asking it. And a more important question is that useful? So work with that, and you'll find the stuff that's useful eventually as you've experienced it enough and you have enough data to actually judge it, which won't be until you've experienced it maybe a couple of dozen times. Then you'll have enough data to say whether it's useful or not. And everything that's information is real. You see, information is real. Consciousness is real. Consciousness is an information system. Information is real. So that means that dream you have is just as real as this reality. They're just different. They're two different reality frames in which you can make choices. Neither one is more or less real than the other. Same with out of body. That out of body, experience you have is just as real as being here in this physical reality. It's just a different rule set, a different reality frame in which you can make choices. So there's lots of different reality frames, and they're all equally real because information is what's real. So we believe that there's this fake reality, we call that our imagination or a dream, and then there's this real reality, which is physical, and that's just nonsense. It isn't like that. That's just a belief, and here you have it again. Those beliefs mess you up.
Yeah.
So you get rid of those beliefs, and suddenly this becomes a lot simpler.
Okay. I'm going to take your advice on this, and I'm going to just go with my inner being, no matter what. Just like Rusty, remember when he was talking about the movie Ghost? Remember that? Where the dude was like, you got to go from your gut. And he was telling in the movie Ghost, you got to do everything from your gut, let the mind go. But here's the thing, man. All of us, when we talked about the beginning of the show, Rusty was like, hey, did you guys go on trips together? Did you do things together? It's like you have a purpose. Now, what I'm trying to find out is, how can I have a purposeful explorative mission and let go at the same time? You see what I'm saying? Because then it starts to get crosswired,
Okay, well, here's the thing. When you have an intellect in the service of fear, that's ego and belief. If you have, and that's what I'm calling your intellect, because most of us, our intellect spends 99% of its time servicing fear. That's the way we are. That's just the normal human being walking around out there.
Right.
People don't realize how many beliefs, how much ego, and how much fear they have, but they live it. It informs most of their choices. So if you have awareness that is in the service of love, then you don't have, that does not create ego and fear and belief. That is an awareness that you can use through your being level. It's not about judging. It's not about comparing. It's not about being right. It's not about being cool. It's not about, having an experience. You just are. It's just the way you are. And you can think from that level. You can direct yourself. So the idea is just go in, just whatever comes, engage it. Just keep engaging things. And eventually you'll see that'll start to produce patterns. And you'll have patterns of things to engage that will become tools for you so that you can get out of body in 2 or 3 minutes. You just close your eyes, let your mind go. Things start to happen, engage it, and you're gone. And you can still think from your being level what you want to do. I want to go heal Aunt Susie. So you just, teleport on over to Aunt Susie and begin, working on her, or whatever else you want to do. I want to go see, what's going on at the pyramids today in Egypt.
Oh,
I'm
wow.
going to count how many visitors are there, and there you are. You teleport there and you can start counting. So things just happen, and then you have to collect this evidence. Go find out if Aunt Susie gets better. Go find out how many people were there. Go look at Google Maps or something and see if the things that you saw are there. And keep doing it until you build up confidence that what you're doing is useful. You say that it works. It's not just random junk that you're getting, but you're doing it. And then once you get that confidence, you're set to do whatever you want because you've learned how to do things that work. So that's kind of the way the process is.
Would you say that's more of an advanced level, though? Because you first got to learn how to let go, right?
Well, letting go. Yeah, learn how to let go. Well, that's just meditation. What meditation does is lets you let go. So all that monkey mind jabber going on in your head is gone. You need to let that go. But that's pretty much it. The rest of it, letting go is easy. Listen, when you read a book, are you aware of everything going on in your environment? No. It's just you and that book. You've let go of all your sense data, and now it's just what's going on in that book is the only thing that's in your mind. And how hard is that? Do you have to, does it take you like a half an hour to practice to, get into a book?
Right,
No, you just do it. It's just trivial. It's simple. When you, if you, some meditation methods, all the meditation is to fill your head with nonsense. So you push the thoughts away, whether it's a mantra or whether it's looking at your breathing, because your breathing is just boring. And after a while, that's non-operative. So you stop thinking about it and there you are. You're not connected to anything. So you can let go, real easily when you're not trying to. But now when you're trying to let go, the trying is intellectual and it keeps you from letting go.
Okay. So let's run through.
It's not about doing. It's not about doing. It's about being.
Right. So let's run through just a real quick example of this and I'll let this go. I'm just so fascinated with this. Me and Rusty, we want to go say, hey man, we want to meet up in, I guess, out of body. Me and him, we want to meet up out of body. We want to go to the crystal statue at the Monroe Institute. I heard that's where a lot of people meet up. We want to go there and meet up. So we both go to sleep at the same time or whatever. We, set a tape recorder beside us just in case we talk in our sleep maybe. At what point, we just go with it? We already have the purpose, right? So we just kind of go with it from there. I'm just trying to figure out how all that happens,
Yeah. Well, you're making it too complicated.
All you have already to do, making it too complicated.
Yeah, making it way too complicated. All you have to do is, probably sit down in a chair. You can put two chairs in a room, right? The room you're in right now. You sit down in a chair and you relax. If you know how to meditate, you let go of all the monkey mind noise, and then you just have an intent to be there. And you have that intent, and you have an intent to look around and see what you see. What is there? What does that thing look like? Are there any people there? That sort of thing. And then when you come back, you may say, yeah, did you see that lady with the red dress on that was standing just on the other side of the crystal? And if you get data like that, then that will tell you that you were both there. You saw it. Now, the next more advanced thing to do is to actually communicate with each other. You're there with the other person and you can talk. You can point things out to each other and then see if when you come back, you both saw the same sort of things, caught your attention. So just work with it. And every time you do it, it'll get a little easier and a little better. It just takes practice. But most of the practice is getting your intellect out of the way. So you can just do that anytime. You don't have to go to sleep together or synchronize anything. So just sit in a chair and do it.
Right.
I teach people how to remote view and how to heal and that sort of thing because it's so easy to do. And I have a whole room full of people. I have, 50, 60 people sitting in uncomfortable chairs out in an audience, little fold up metal chairs. So they're sitting out there almost shoulder to shoulder in an audience. I don't have them meditate. I don't have them take a deep breath. I don't even tell them they have to close their eyes. They can close their eyes if they want to. I just say, tell me what's in this box, if it's remote viewing, or, here's a person that's ill. Tell me what's wrong with them. Where do you see problems? And, 30-40% of the people get it all right.
Wow. I think that's kind of how Edgar Cayce got into doing that.
No lead in, nothing. Just do it. And the reason that they get it right is because they are totally detached from it, because they don't expect to get anything right. They're just going along. It's like, humor me. Just do this. You see? And they get it right. But now if they tried to get it right, as soon as they say, I got this. I had a whole bunch of it right. Oh, I'm going to try to do better next time. Then they don't get any of it right, because now they're trying. You see? And that's the problem. They've got their intellect involved in it now, and they don't do it right. That's called beginner's luck. First time you roll a bowling ball, you don't really expect to do anything with it. You don't know what's going to happen. You just push the thing down there, and in any way it seems like a good idea to you, and you do really well. Most people do, because that's beginner's luck.
Yeah. Everybody's like, man, it's beginner's luck. Yeah.
The reason they have beginner's luck is because they're not trying. They're not. They don't have any performance anxiety. Their intellect is gone. They're just doing it from the being level. You see, the intellect isn't there. So then they can do it really, really well. And as soon as they start trying, now their intellect's involved, they can't do it. Any athlete will tell you that if they're really like Olympic quality, they'll tell you that it's like 80% mental. And the mental thing is to get your intellect out of the way. You practice it and practice it so often that you stop thinking about it. You don't say, well, okay, I'm supposed to hold that shot put up here on this shoulder. Then I'm going to take one spin around. And then, if you have to think about it, you'll be terrible. You have to get to the point that you can do it without your intellect involved. You just do it at the being level. And then you get good. You get really good when you get to that level of proficiency. So it's the same thing going out of body. That intellect gets in your way. It's the being level is the real you. The intellect is this nagging, wannabe controller that is mostly dealing with fear, ego, and belief, and it just gets in your way.
Yeah, man, you make it sound so easy, and it really is. Yeah. Just watching you talk about it is easy.
Yeah, it is easy.
It's easy.
It is easy. What you do is you're the one that makes it hard, you see?
Right.
It's not hard at all. You don't have to go through any of that stuff. These people are sitting there stone cold. A lot of them never meditated a time in their life. They're just sitting there, and they get a lot of the answers right. And it surprises them. It shocks them. And that's my whole point of doing it, that they see that it is possible. They get something that would be impossible to guess, and they get it dead on. And then after that, they don't do so well, because then they start trying to do it. Oh, I can do this better. Let me concentrate more. And then, of course, it all goes away. You just have to do it. And it's really, it really is easy in the sense that you are consciousness. You're already out of your body. You don't live in your body. All you have to do is get into your mind, grab hold of a different data stream, and there you are. It isn't any harder than that. It's that intellect that gets in the way, because as soon as you do that and that pink rabbit and daisy show up, you judge it and you say, oh, that's nonsense. That's silly. Let me do something else.
Right.
And then a lot of people are like voyeurs. They expect something to happen. They're so used to watching TV and movies. They're just sitting there waiting for, somebody to deliver, a burning bush or, right. Something magical, or, the words of wisdom are going to come. They're waiting for something to be given to them. Well, nothing's going to be given to you. That's all intellectual nonsense. You have to go be it. You have to experience it. You have to get involved with it. That's how you find it. So you find that whatever comes into your mind, go engage it, and that will be a doorway for you to go do something else. Then eventually you can use your intent to do whatever you want.
I want to get a little bit nerdy with you here, because I have to.
Go right ahead.
Now, we talk about a lot of things on the show. We talk about UFOs, paranormal activity, things like that. Mm-hmm. When I heard Robert Monroe talk about physically pinching a woman,
mm-hmm.
Now you're a physicist. How is that possible? How is that possible?
You can physically pinch a woman just with your mind. You don't need to be out of body.
Have you done this? Have you?
You can interact. Yes, I've interacted with the physical world before. Here's an example. I used to take my young son out of body. I'd go pick him up. I'd come home from the lab, about 2:00 in the morning, and get into bed. And instead of going to sleep like I should have, I'd start practicing all the things I'd just been doing in the lab until about 6:00, and then I'd get up and go to work. So I'd stop by about an hour before anybody was to get up, pull my son up out of body, and we'd go out and have an adventure together. And one time we were in the oceans, just exploring the oceans. My son was about 4 or 5 years old, and we went through this big whale. And as my son went through it, he hit his head on the whale bones, and he hit one bone after another going down the rib cage. He went bong, 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 and he kept banging his head, scared him half to death. So we came right back because it frightened him because he hadn't had physical interaction anymore. And we had a lot of fun with that. So this physical interaction thing can just, it just happens. You can do it when you try to do it. It's in a matter of intent. Again, if you intend to, Bob, when he did this, he wanted to know what would happen. So he had an intention to do it and to make a mark, to do something that she would feel so that he could verify it.
Yeah, because she was saying,
he had that intention. Because he had that intention, he could do that.
I understand.
That's how you heal people. You heal people by changing their physical system. That's a lot bigger deal than just pinching them. You go in and, change things that are in their body just with your intention. So you can do that with your mind. Yes, you can affect the physical systems with your intent. The placebo effect says if you can create a positive intent about health, people will get better. If you create a negative intent, people will get worse. And we mean really get better and worse, not just think they are, but, doing this in double-blind studies, people's health gets better or worse based on their intent. So mind influences and changes matter. And the way it does it is it modifies the future probability. So Bob's intent while he was out of body modified the future probability of that woman having a bruise or a mark in that spot that he pinched, and that she would have felt it.
And this is the same way we can observe things that are actually happening right now if we want to go look at what's happening right now at the pyramids.
Intent is the motive force in consciousness. Intent is what moves things. So intent is the thing. Whatever your intent needs to be focused and steady. Most people's intent is flopping around in 4 or 5 directions all at once and isn't very coherent or steady. That's why you learn to meditate, so that you can let all that noise and static go, so you can take an intent and make it very focused and very precise. And that gives you power then.
Do you think if somebody was to have evil intent that they could harm people?
Yeah, Bob did talk about that in his book.
Happens all the time.
I mean, it possibly cause death.
Go find somebody that comes from coastal Africa, particularly the West Coast, but really coastal Africa all around, and ask them about that. And they'll tell you about people making a living by, same thing Al Capone did. Al Capone would come around and said, you need to pay me money or your restaurant's going to burn down. So people paid him money. Otherwise, they'd come back and burn the restaurant down. And these people will do the same thing. You need to pay me money or your children are all going to get ill. You pay me money or you'll be barren and won't be able to have any children. You pay me money or I'll make you sick. I'll kill you. That kind of thing. And it works. They can do that sort of thing. So they get paid money. So that's all over, that in the Virgin Islands or in Haiti, that was called voodoo.
Mm-hmm.
But it's intent modifying future probability, and it's just the way the system works. You can use it for good or for bad.
Wow.
I even had a magician, he's considered a Rosicrucian, explain that to me. He said, this reality was built with a certain set of laws and things like that, and what we use is a backdoor program using symbols and metaphors to get through things that we want to do. But their magic was all about ascending their own consciousness, not going out and trying to get a new car or hurting somebody or something,
Exactly. and their metaphors and symbols were tools that they used to focus their intent. The symbols and metaphors weren't fundamental. They were just tools that they had used. Somebody had created those tools, and of course tools work. Light workers do heal people with their light, even though light really doesn't exist. It's a tool. It's a focuser of their intent, and it works fine. So tools are good. Just because they're not fundamental doesn't make them not useful.
Now, speaking of tools, the Hemi-Sync, you were actually one of the guys that helped create this thing. One of the few guys that helped create Hemi-Sync as a tool to help us do this.
Dennis and I kind of invented that. Bob was out, I think, in California let's see, where was that? Anyway, he was out giving a program in California. He was gone for a couple of weeks. And Dennis and I, actually Dennis came up with the idea. It wasn't mine. He read in a Scientific American, I think 1961 maybe, or something like that. It was an old Scientific American about the binaural beat, and the binaural beat having the odd capability of being able to entrain brainwaves. So we went out, and Dennis made up a tape, and he created the tape of binaural beats, and we went out to test it, and it worked really well. So we got a signal generator out of the EE department and some other stuff out of the physics department, because both of us were kind of familiar with both those departments, and we knew the people there, and they had old equipment that they could let go. So we borrowed and begged stuff and went out and started making binaural beats and playing with them and trying to optimize them. And when Bob got back at the end of his trip, we showed them to Bob, and he started playing them to other people, and they worked on everybody. So that was the beginning of Hemi-Sync. Hemi-Sync is a bunch of kind of soothing modulated pink noise sounds with a binaural beat running underneath of it. And the pink noise sounds just give it a pretty cover, but the active ingredient's the binaural beat.
Man, that's so cool. I remember the first gateway experience when I picked up and I was really getting into this, and I heard Bob Monroe talking to me in my ear. It was probably the coolest thing I ever heard.
He had a great voice, didn't he?
Yeah.
He had a really great voice.
He's talking to me. He's telling me how to do this thing, and he's just as soon as you start, he starts giving you tools. All right, imagine this box, and we're going to do what we call a resonance. We're going to resonate, and we're going to do. And he had it down, and it became like every night I was like, I got to listen to my tapes, man, because I felt I had a relationship with this guy. I mean, he was something else.
Yeah, he's made up all sorts of tools for people to use. None of the tools are fundamental. The chakras, they're not fundamental. Chakras don't really exist. They're tools. They're ways that you can slice and dice the data in order to talk about it. They're metaphors, and you can place them at various parts of the body because it makes people, they can relate to the body better than they can relate to something abstract. So it's just a set of tools. And if you get enough people thinking about the same tools, then they become almost real.
Right. Now I'm going to ask you another nerdy question. Todd Akamesis and I were talking last night, and we were talking about Bob when he decided he wanted to go talk to the president. And, earlier we were talking about how he had wondered, if I can do this and other people are doing this, could other people be doing this to affect our reality, to control our dreams, to make us fear certain things, all kinds of stuff. And he went to visit the president, and there was a security guard in this realm, almost like guarding the president's astral self. Saying, the president's not expecting, he's not talking to anybody. Now, I don't know if that was Bob's expectations that did that, or if the government really knows about this stuff and guards the president. I know it's a nerdy question, but I'm really curious about it.
Now, it would depend on the president and what he understood and the people around him, but in general, no, they do not have that kind of protection. And in general, anybody can go talk to the president and leave thoughts in his mind. That's just the way it is. And people who are who have a lot of leverage, in other words, they can affect a whole lot of other people, then these people are the ones that get a lot of both negative and positive talking. They've got people filling their heads with ideas from all over, and that's part of what they have to deal with. Is they get a lot of stuff, but nothing is going to force them to do anything because they have free will. They can always make a choice, but they can be encouraged and they can be led and nudged towards certain things from other people. And you can do that with anybody, not just the president, but any president and any person. You can interact with them. All consciousness is netted, even the dogs and the cats and the horses, all consciousness is netted. You can communicate by telepathy with intent. Now, again, you have a very focused, clear intent from the being level, then you have a lot of success. If you're mainly working from your intellect, then it's a pretty weak connection. Right. So most people can't do it very well, but it's not a hard thing to do. We're all netted. Now, it is also possible for you to turn off these things. It's just like a web page. You have to log in to, you have to put in a URL before you get the web page. And if you don't like it, you can always delete that web page. Get rid of the URL and the web page will go away. It's sort of like that. Your intent can shut off these connections as well as it can open them up. That's kind of why, we were talking about the negative stuff. That's kind of why when a voodoo person is going to hurt you or work on you to get you, to do whatever they're going to do to you, first thing they do is try to scare you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's what the doll's for. The doll's to scare you. You see, that lets you know, oh, the voodoo master's after you now. You better watch out. And once you're frightened, then that opens a channel, because that fear now is a fear of that person, and that just opens a channel between you and that person. And the more you fear them, the more access they have to you. So you see, that's the point of that little memento that you get, is to start fear, which then makes their job a whole lot easier. So you just don't have any fear, and once you get rid of fear, then you don't have those issues. You can just turn anything off you want just by intending it to turn off. You're kind of invulnerable then to these things, because you just don't have to accept that energy from somebody else or those comments from somebody else unless you want to. And then it's the same thing like you have with your telephone. You can make a list of just the people you want to communicate to, and you don't want to communicate to anybody else, or you can let anybody ring in. It's up to you.
So obviously, I guess my last nerdy question nerdy questions is going to be, then aliens got to be real. There's got to be evolved societies that already know this stuff, that can go in and out of realities and travel to planets and stars and solar systems and physically manifest and then go away. It just seems it's got to be real.
Well, there's two things there. One, I think most of the ET experiences are experiences in consciousness. Most people, it's a data stream. You get data, and that data is interpreted as a reality. And most people are not savvy enough to know the difference between, the data that defines as physical reality and that other data that gets superimposed on their data stream. Seems just as physical, but it's not necessarily so. So you wake up and see a little green man with pointy ears at the bottom of your bed. That doesn't necessarily mean that thing's in the physical world. He just appears to be there. That data's on your data stream.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily physical. So most of it occurs in consciousness. And yes, it's not that hard to go visit other reality frames. And that's not just in this universe, but in some other total different physical universe. That's not this universe. You can go visit there. You can interact with the people telepathically, or you can get into their data stream and walk around with them and shake their hand and give them a hug. You can get a body there. That's not all that hard to do. And if I can do that there, which I can, then others can do that here, which they can. And that's out of different reality frames. But when it comes to this reality frame, there's an interesting logical problem that's called the Fermi Paradox. The Fermi Paradox was created by Enrico Fermi, a famous physicist, who on his lunchtime with a bunch of buds sat around and started to compute the probability of seeing an ET. And they found out, of course, they knew, because they're smart guys and they're physicists, they knew that our solar system, our planet, is in a relatively newer part of the universe. There's other parts of the universe that are billions and billions of years older than ours. So if we have this idea that the Earth isn't special, so other places and other parts of the universe certainly had places like the Earth. If the Earth's not special, then some of these places would be more than 1 billion years ahead of us, because their part of the universe formed 1 billion years ahead of our part of the universe. So that means that if they got to the same kind of technology that we got to in the same amount of time it took us to get here, then they would have another 1 billion years to evolve that we haven't had yet.
So the possibilities are endless.
How advanced do you think we would be in another 1 billion years from now? We've only been, walking around on 2 feet, without fur on us for a couple of, for maybe 1 million years. We've only been really known as humanoids for about 200,000 years. What about another 1 billion years of evolution and technological development? So they did the calculations that said, well, such people existed and they're way ahead of us because their universe is a lot older than ours. Then even if they were restricted to pokey sub-light speed, that they couldn't go all that fast, maybe just 10% of the speed of light, or maybe only 1% of the speed of light, they would have had time to have been here and passed here. They should have been all over our part of the universe by now.
Yeah.
Because that's a lot of time. They move out one inhabitable place at a time, right? That's the way we inhabited the Earth. We started in a couple of places and then we just kept spreading out. Eventually you cover the whole thing. So they calculated all this in probability, and it was a real strong assumption that said if there was other life, and if any of it came from this older part of the universe, and it's a bigger part of the universe, so it certainly should, then where are they? They should be here. They should have been here, before we even got out of the trees.
That's right. So it is possible that we made gods out of them.
That was the idea.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people have tried to explain the Fermi Paradox of, where are they? Was the paradox. They should have been here. And not just here, flying by or something, but actually here, integrated with us. This is a good place to live, I guess, particularly back then. So there aren't any real good signs that they are here, or that they've been here that long, and that there's an interest in that they've just, they're everywhere. They should be every place that's inhabitable. These things should be. There should be bases on the moon. There should be bases on all the other planets and things. Everything that is a place to be, they should be.
Mm-hmm.
Really, 1 billion years more technology. The moon's not all that hospitable, but you could build shelters there, and if you had that kind of technology, that would work. So anyway, we don't see any of that. And the idea that, well, they're there, they're just sneaking around, that's not really a very viable answer. That's not too likely. So anyhow, there is a way to answer that. There is a strong answer to that very strong paradox, and that is that we're alone. There is nothing else out there. And the reason for this answer is, the reason we think there must be somebody out there is there's all these suns and all these planets, and certainly something would have developed.
Right.
But that's a materialistic view. This is a virtual reality. And a virtual reality for consciousness, it's a virtual reality entropy reduction trainer. You only need a certain number of seats. And all that stuff doesn't get computed unless somebody's looking at it. That's the way virtual realities work. So unless somebody makes the measurement, unless somebody looks at it with a telescope, it's never rendered. It just sits there. Those stars in the sky and all of that stuff that we can't see with our eye never gets rendered to anybody. It's just all potential, doesn't really exist. So it doesn't cost the system much overhead at all. It's trivial in the amount of overhead it costs the system to put what somebody looks at the Hubble telescope in some direction. Okay, they have to model that little piece of data, and as soon as that telescope looks someplace else, they don't model that at all. It's gone. Somebody looks back, they'll model the same thing. You see, that's the way. Look at No Man's Sky, a new video game. Works the same way. So if that's the case, then how many seats does the larger conscious system need in this simulator or in all the simulators it has in the different reality frames? You'll get to a point where the cost of the seat, the cost of the consciousness logging on to an avatar, you have to support that with data streams. The cost of doing that is more than the return that you get from it. Once you get to a number, you see?
Yeah, I wonder if there's only 144,000 seats, possibly.
I doubt that. They got, what, 7.5 billion of them right here on this trainer.
Right.
And there's lots of other trainers out there. But the system only needs so many. It's a finite system. It only has so many resources. It only needs so many seats, after which additional seats just don't add much, but they still cost. So when that cost effectiveness equation, turns south or goes negative, then you don't need any more. So it could be that the reason that the Fermi Paradox is such a strong paradox is there are no ETs. It's just us, because the system doesn't need any more seats, and there is no overhead to keeping all of the rest of that stuff around. It's not around. It doesn't exist until it ends up in somebody's data stream.
I see what you're saying.
So
you're not necessarily saying they're not real. You're just saying there's only so much data that can be interpreted, basically.
Well, the only, in the World of Warcraft, if there are no players and the World of Warcraft doesn't have anybody to send a data stream to, then it doesn't exist. You see, the computer isn't just computing it for fun. It only sends out data streams to people who have logged on, and that's it. So if that's the 7.5 billion of us right now, which may go to 10 or 15 billion, who knows how much this planet can support. But that is a certain number of seats, and that's how many data streams are out there when people are awake and need data. So that's all there is. Nothing else has to be sent out. And if all those people log off, then the system's sending out nothing. So all that stuff in all the rest of the universe is never computed. So It isn't a waste of resources, you see. Now, that's a possibility. But the system may want to play ET, and you may have people coming from other reality frames rather than from our own reality frame, not from our own physical universe, but coming from other reality frames. Because, like I say, that's not hard to do. I do that. In other reality frames. Gotcha. I pop in sometimes with a body, sometimes just, as an observer, and sometimes just to communicate telepathically. But it's not that hard to take a body either. So you can do that, and if I can do it there, they can do it here. But they're from other reality frames, not necessarily this physical reality.
Gotcha.
And yes, that does happen.
Well,
so most of these things happen in consciousness, and most of it, remember, you get what you fear. So that's why Bob Monroe ran into that wall that he couldn't get over and couldn't get back. That was his fear of not being able to get back. That was the wall. Right. So if you have a fear and you start talking to somebody that's non-physical, then people's fears start to work in, and pretty soon they've got this bad relationship with ETs, and it's really their interpretation of something going on in consciousness space, not in physical space. So anyway, food for thought.
Well,
possibilities.
Unfortunately, we've got to get out of here, Tom. Man, it's been awesome talking to you.
Yes.
Awesome. Tell everybody real quick how they can find your information and how they can get a hold of you.
Okay, website www.mybigtoe.com. Where I'm going to be and whom I'm going to be talking to is MBT Events, www.mbtevents.com. You can get my books at any bookstore, Amazon, Baker & Taylor. We'll ship them to any bookstore or library. They're free on Google Books. Go to Google Books and look up MBT, and you can read the whole thing right there for nothing.
Awesome.
Google, and I don't mean Google, but I have YouTube. I've got like 400 or 500 videos there, and most of them are long, so that'll probably keep you busy for the next 20 years.
Right on.
So there's lots of stuff for you to look and read and find out about. If you're just looking to get involved, look at the talk I gave in Marseille, France, or the one in Calgary, Canada, and that will give you a good overview.
Thanks for visiting with us, Tom. It's been awesome. I hope we can do this again one day.
Yeah, loved every minute of it.
I've been talking fast. I hope I haven't blown anybody's brains up.
No, you're doing great. Thanks for spending time with us. That's it, guys. We got to get out of here. Thomas Campbell, author of My Big Toe. Next week, James Clarkson. We'll see you guys next week. That was awesome. I can't wait to keep doing this. See you guys.